Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Press Break Podcast. I'm Chelsea Late, joined by Jamie and Tyler, as always. And we have a later in the week episode. We've been traveling, we've been busy, we've been doing all the things. We'll get to that. But we're just going to start a little bit with the biggest news, maybe, in women's basketball this week, that Diana Taurasi has decided to retire after 20 seasons in the WNBA. And I mean, we all kind of expected it, not gonna lie, but it's still kind of surreal to be experiencing it. She announced the other day, and then she went on The View yesterday, which was kind of random, but you know, you do you.
That was a mess.
Yeah.
That was a mess of an appearance, but
yeah.
that's
So
neither here nor there.
she is one of the last players, I think, who is going to be able to say that they played their entire decades-long career in one city in Phoenix. And we thought to start off the episode, we would just kind of like talk about our favorite DT moments quickly, just to kind of celebrate. It feels like something you can't just like move on from quickly because she was such like an icon in, you know, the sport. She was such a trailblazer. She was one of those people that really first like transcended from women's basketball into like popular culture and stuff like that. So she's definitely an icon. So let's start. Tyler, what's your favorite DT moment?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I love basketball players that are just jerks. I do.
Yeah.
I do. And honestly, for me, like Diana Taurasi was the first time in my like individual experience, like just like growing up watching basketball, that I really saw like a women's player be a jerk.
Oh yeah.
And I mean that complimentary, like wholeheartedly. Because like growing up, I went to OU games, but we never really had a player like that. Like Courtney Parrish was the only player that really had like the accolades to talk like that, and she didn't do that, you know. But look at this. You want to talk about a relic? 2014, my first WNBA game. I still have the ticket. Sparks versus Mercury at Staples Center.
Damn.
And that was like the first time like experiencing in person Diana Taurasi. As a kid, like I was down low. Like it was like I didn't know any of the players, honestly. Like when I was young. Like I hadn't like fully.
The tickets were probably like $15.
I got those tickets for free from someone out front.
Incredible.
Like it's a whole, and that I mean that's a whole Tyler Lore thing there. But like being able to like watch her in person and like I mean that was Candace, that was BG. Like that was stacked rosters at that time,
yeah.
And so to be able to see her there and like just like that was the first time I had seen a WNBA players. Like I didn't like there was no WNBA in Oklahoma at that time. Like not like close to me, you know. Like it was like the shock. Was the shock there then? I didn't. Regardless, that was my first time seeing the WNBA and seeing DT. And DT just like even amongst all the stars just shined in that game. Like you could just tell like the aura that she had, you know, and like it you could feel like she was different in that game and that amongst other stars. And just the amount of like since then, the amount of moments that she's had and you know, I didn't get to experience like the entirety of her career in that way, but what I did get to experience like on the back half of it were still just so many incredible moments, from punching doors to meet you in the lobby to I'll tell you, and this is a really random moment, but I don't know why this has stuck with me in this way. But the ESPN simulcast that she did in the Final Four with Sue Bird.
Oh yes! Oh my god!
Like for whatever reason, like when I think of Diana Taurasi, as random as it is, because it should be the basketball and it should be the encore play, but like the jokes that she was making on that broadcast, and specifically
South Carolina,
it was to not know that, and what's crazy is that that's not even the one that sticks in my head. It's when Cam Brink came back on the screen, and she goes, "Well, y'all, Cam Brink fouled out," or something like that, and I was like, nobody else in the game can talk like this.
No.
Because nobody else is Diana Taurasi.
Exactly.
And just I know for me, you know, like growing up, DT was one of the few players that wasn't a women's basketball player. She was a basketball player. Like and like no matter you know all the BS jokes and idiots and you know we know who we're talking about when we think about you know people talking about women's basketball. But it felt like with Diana Taurasi, there was just such a respect. And that's what lasted with me was just like the level of respect that like you couldn't deny DT's greatness. And so that will always kind of be the lasting thing to me. And I expect and hope to see her on broadcast or something very soon because goodness gracious, we need that.
Oh yeah.
That's the hope. But I mean, undeniably, everyone has their own GOAT, and I feel like that's so much personal preference. But like, you want to talk about like undeniable Mount Rushmore, like there is no WNBA without Diana Taurasi. There's very few years in this league that we have known without DT.
Yeah.
And so her greatness is something that's not going away anytime soon.
Yeah. Jamie, what do you think?
Well, for me, being able to see one of her last games, in the playoffs, crazy. And then beyond that, I always think back to, a lot of the time I think of like, personal relationships to things. And so I remember back in the Wubble season, when, again, talk about a menace, like, that was maybe one of the like peak menace phases of DT's career, just because of the situation there. But
she also like did not give it absolute F for the last like 5 years of her career. Right. She was like, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. But that season, that was a year where Bridget Carleton ended up in the starting lineup for Minnesota, had a really solid season, and one of her first games starting was against Phoenix. And I remember she and DT guarding each other and hearing from her later that, like, she was getting cussed out because she went 4 for 4 from 3. And it was, like, the audacity to do that against Diana was unheard of. Incredible. And so, like, and it was such a, like, sign of respect from her where, like, if I'm pissed at you, if I'm irritated by you, it's because, like, you're doing something. And so she was just like being kind of pesky, and so DT being DT, like I always love to hear that from like the people who experience it, because it's just like, yep, it is like on its face crazy, but it's a total sign of endearment.
Yeah. And I think the like whole, like anybody that has ever had one of those interactions would probably turn around and tell you that, like, when the game stops, like, she's the nicest person you've ever met. Like, that's only what I've heard about DT, is that she's super kind and super like will give people their flowers and all of that stuff off the court. So that's, also like, you got to be able to talk your trash, but also, be able to give flowers when you can. But I would say my favorite DT moment, it's, obviously the door is a big one, but I think that whole series of like Phoenix and Chicago, it was when you really could start seeing how big the WNBA was getting, like in Canada and like in, my kind of circle, and like everybody was watching that series. Like it was one of the first times where I went on my Twitter and like everybody was like, oh my God, the Chicago Phoenix series. And there was one of those games where we all knew Diana Taurasi was struggling with an ankle injury, and she just went off. I think she scored like 40 something points. She won Phoenix a game, so it wasn't the last game, obviously, but just like went off and like was doing it, obviously her. And obviously we knew she was like already hitting 40 and just like cemented. I think that was one of the times that I think really cemented her legacy, because her team is in a WNBA final. She's performing at the highest level. She's talking her smack, but also getting it done. Like she could always hold it up. And so that was a really cool moment. It was one of those first like collective watch in Canada things. And I remember seeing the numbers after that series and it being like the most watched at the time game that we had ever had here in Canada. So, I mean, her legacy is international. It's, it's hard to think that there's ever going to be another player that is able to get the resume that she does. 6-time Olympic gold medalist, world champion, European League champion, WNBA champion, MVP.
She's never been a stage and she hasn't won it. Like exactly. Literally never been a stage in the women's basketball world that she has not won it. Like it's ridiculous.
Multiple continents, multiple countries, multiple everything. And like you think about, we talked last year about how Asia Wilson's season was like the best season that's ever happened. But you think about the records that she broke were all Diana Taurasi's from like 2006. And like to think that Diana Taurasi was doing that in 2006 when, the season was shorter, there wasn't as much, time to be able to put up those numbers. Like, it's wild to think about. Obviously, Asia, very different players, but like the fact that like that she was doing that as a guard, like she was doing that shooting three, she was doing that without the size that Asia has and without as many games. So that's what it's just. I will definitely miss seeing her play because again, like she's just so entertaining.
So weird.
Yeah,
I think she's good. She's got to coach like to some degree, maybe not like in the W, maybe not in college, but at least in something like Unrivaled, something like AU, like something. Yeah, I think that she would be so great, and just the entertainment factor would be through the roof.
I just need her on my screen in some way. Bro, she was drafted in 2004. I was 2.
Oh Jesus.
Sorry, but like I was 2 years old.
Yeah,
like that's crazy.
Wild. And she just retired right now, and you're yapping about basketball online.
That's crazy. Like that is like genuinely insane.
Yeah, she's. I also just flashed into my mind when she slapped Marina in the face last season.
Oh my god.
Like, and Marina was just like,
just didn't do anything about it. If nothing else cements the lore and respect to DT, even though I still am on the ground that Marina should have done something back, but that's me.
I think that Diana should sign a one-day comeback against Paige Beckers and just have the most hooligan game that's ever existed.
When was it the Mercury? I think it was the Mercury's graphic where like it was like Paige's quote about Diana, and it was like Paige Beckers who won't receive her welcome to the league moment. That for whatever reason that broke my heart more than anything. Like, what do you mean we don't get any more stories about like the first
Diana from on the court at least?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So that's
true.
There will always be more stories.
Yeah.
She'll just go sit courtside and just yell.
And that's
She's just gonna pull up to people's press conferences.
Yeah.
Please.
By all means.
Yeah.
Like I hope that I can see her getting in with like the Mercury ownership. I can see her getting broadcasting. Like there's so many different lanes, but obviously like I mean the impact that she had as a player, like matching that, she set a high bar for herself. So I'm genuinely excited to see what else Diana Taurasi gives to the game of basketball. Just I don't imagine a world where DT is not involved in some level. It might be a year or two until it happens. Like it might, a sabbatical, but
there's a team starting next season that still needs a coach.
No. But I would be down for it. But I had to insert
my Toronto tempo.
If that's what it takes, then I'm down for it. That's what it takes.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, shout out to DT. I mean, if Diana Taurasi is one of our loyal listeners, hey, and also congrats on the great career.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we just had to give ourselves a segment to talk about that because she's just, I mean, again, she's like one of the biggest goats of the game. But moving on now, we're going to talk a little bit about Unrivaled because Jamie took a little side quest to Miami, the first of us to get down, to Miami to watch some Unrivaled. You went on Monday?
Yes. I did. I had to think about that for a second.
I know. I don't know what day it is, honestly. Like, it's just been a week. But went on Monday. Give us kind of like the lowdown of the in-person experience, because we've obviously talked a lot about like what we're seeing as a viewer, but like I have heard from a lot of people it's like a very cool experience to witness.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like you can see it on broadcasts where, okay, this is a pretty intimate setting and it looks really well put together and it looks like there's a lot of people there. And so you're just waiting to see, okay, what's different? What feels different when you're actually there in person? And everything, like the intensity just ratcheted up a notch when you're there in person. Like very, very, very positive to actually be there and see it. Like really little things ultimately, but the fact that, they have all those big screens that go behind the benches and go on the sideline and things like that. And they're just like, they're beautiful. The graphics they have up there look really nice. Everything just seems really like smooth and integrated well. And it's just really impressive to see how cohesive everything is and knowing that, they were still kind of pulling things together late into the game. And frankly, they still are. They only just signed that licensing deal that allows them to release merch with players' names on it. And so it's not like they came in with everything completely flawless, perfect, but you can't let the enemy of greatness be perfection. Like, it's not going to be perfect. And so the fact that they've allowed themselves to keep innovating and keep improving and be open to feedback from fans, from media, from the players, like, that has been the biggest takeaway that I've had covering it in general from a distance. And then actually being there in person, as you see just all these really, it feels like minor things, but comes together to be a really great experience. Like, I know early on, there was a lot of people who were kind of disappointed because they didn't really have their merch figured out initially. And by the time I got there, they had really terrific offerings. They had really cool t-shirts with like a specific design for each team. Like the rose one I thought was beautiful, had like roses inside of a basketball hoop. I really enjoyed that one. And yeah, I mean, all of it I just thought was intentional and well executed. Their game day experience was awesome. The only thing that I didn't totally love is how compact the time frame was, where when you go to the press conference after the first matchup, I missed the whole first quarter of the second game. And so I understand the trade-offs with like TV windows and stuff. And so I think that that's something that they'll be continuing to work on and adjust going forward, because, hey, okay, could we have between game entertainment or something just to buy you another 10, 15 minutes? But again, that's something that you do once you're established and once you have that TV presence figured out. And so I just thought that it was absolutely incredible. Fans were super, super engaged. There was a bunch of people who I know traveled in for it. There was also some people who I think were locals who had kind of picked their team that they were rooting for. And it was cool. Like, my grandparents live in Florida. And so I was in Orlando for Iowa State to play UCF, made a quick jaunt up to the Jacksonville area to see my grandparents. And then the next day was when I went down to Miami. So I did basically almost as far north and almost as far south as you could go. But I told my grandparents where I was going. My grandma's like, oh, I know of that. When I read the sports section, I see the team names, but I don't know the teams. And I'm like, yeah, Grandma, they're all new. It's not the same as like the W was. She's like, oh, that's so neat. And she was watching, and she's like, she texted me after. She's like, we were looking for you. We didn't see you, but it was very entertaining. And that's all my grandparents do is they watch basketball. Like, they were all jacked up to talk to me about the NC State Notre Dame game when I'm a senior.
The amount of hoops I'm going to be able to watch when I'm like retired is going to be like.
It's different, and it's something that no one has ever seen before. And so just to see the engagement live and then to also talk to people and continue to see it grow was very, very cool. So just a tremendous experience, and especially coming down the stretch, they're getting ready to go into their like really quick playoff segment, and that's going to be, a long weekend. But the player development has been tremendous. So definitely going to be making sure I'm locked in for the last couple matchups that we got. But the difference that I think we're going to see in a lot of these players is huge. I talked about it a little bit on the Her Hoop Stats Blue Sky account. Just some of the things I noticed with like the gameplay and things like that. But it's really going to be huge for a lot of these players, and it was an awesome experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've been covering it all season, and you're right. Like, the availability being after the game. They were doing it at the beginning. They were doing it during the halftime of the second game, but I think it was just too far after that the players were like, I don't want to wait around.
Yeah.
Which is fair. So, that's definitely something I agree with. And yeah, it's like cool to see just like the way that they've intentionally done it to be like with the screens and knowing that you have that whole background. I feel like they use that space really well.
They do.
For it not having like fans or anything. And yeah, the merch I've seen is really, really cool. So unfortunately, due to duties and the exchange rate currently, I will not be copying, but in the future. But yeah, it's a really cool. I'm excited to see. I think like we'll be seeing, I think in like May and June, how it's really affected players like Angel Reese and like the younger player Rakia, Aaliyah, like those players, and like how it's really helped them bounce from year one to year two. I think that's a really exciting prospect. And I mean, of course, like overseas has really done that in the past, but like us here, we can't really keep up with overseas as well. Like it's time zones, it's whatever. So having something that you can actually keep up with, I think is a really cool concept. But anyway, moving on again, because there's just so much basketball to talk about, we're gonna hit a little bit on the top 4 conferences here and just talk about we're heading into the last week. Well, I'm sorry, we're in the last week currently of conference play in college basketball. The regular season is going to end next week, and then we're going to head into conference tournaments, and then it's going to be right into March Madness, and it's truly going to be madness because there's so much going on at that time. But yeah, it's probably, I think, my favorite time of the basketball calendar. Like, a WNBA finals is fun, the draft is fun. I love the WNBA season, but there's something about March Madness.
March is different.
It's just different. It's like, oh, like this is when like careers start. This is when epic moments happen. This is when, wow, I sound like a commercial right now, but it just, like, I don't know, it feels different. So let's hit. We're gonna start with, we said,
the SEC.
SEC, yes,
because this one is so funny.
Yeah,
so funny. Like,
Oh.
Texas and South Carolina, are tied, and presumably they should win out.
Yeah,
and will be tied.
Yeah,
and this is now going to result in a coin flip from the SEC commissioner to decide who gets the number 1 seed in the SEC tournament, and that is a massive difference. Like, you're talking like the SEC tournament. Realistically, you're playing good teams regardless because it's the SEC and stats. But you're talking about the difference of playing LSU or not, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's chalk across the board, you're talking about the idea of having to play LSU and then the number 1 seed as opposed to being the number 1 seed.
So, like, let me get this straight. So they have the same records.
Yep.
The head-to-head is tied?
1-1.
Yes, they've only lost to each other.
And then
crazy.
The third thing is literally a coin flip. They couldn't think of anything else.
That's my issue. Is that
the
Big 12 literally has 6 options.
Yeah, I don't know how
get to coin flip.
This is where we're at.
Like, to just think that. Well, why would we need anything beyond win-loss? Like, because if say that they both had 2 losses and one was to a different team, you would go down the line, and it would be whoever had the best record against the progressive, like, next best teams.
Mm-hmm.
So if one of them went 2-0 against the number 3 seed and one of them went 1-1, even though that means the other one would have lost to a worse team, they would have ended up getting the first seed. And that at least makes some, you could say, it's not the best.
Yeah, I was literally going to say point differential. Like,
South Carolina blew the doors off of Texas.
Yeah, that's the thing, because that's, okay, so you have those 2 tiebreakers, neither one of them factor in, but to then not have a single other option, to not see a single scenario in which you may need additional ones, like, that's crazy. Like, again, I kind of default to look to trying to contextualize for, like, the Big 12, because that's what I'm so used to looking at. For instance, like, the Big 12 will look at their total wins if it comes down to it, not even just conference total wins. They'll look at an Sports Source Analytics team rating. Like, they will do anything to make it actually have some sort of basis and logic, as opposed to a coin flip. And that's just, whether you think it's the best way to do it or not, you want to have something that has some reasoning to it before you go to just the literal flip of a coin.
Like, total games won, Texas would win. If they're going by total games lost, right now Texas would win because they only have 2 losses to South Carolina's 3. There's just so many other point differential, what Tyler and I were yelling about. Like, I just think about, like, FIBA and how important point differential is in that, because that's what I'm used to looking at.
Yeah.
And, like, even when you think about, like, the WNBA, you have, like game balance, you have, like, it's just, there's so many other factors. But to go to, like, first, second coin flip, where it's literally, it's chance. There's no logic.
I will say, though, that's so funny. And so I'm not gonna lie, my mind immediately went to, okay, if we're gonna be ridiculous, where can we take this? And I'll tell you, the first 2 ideas that I had, a Vic Schaefer, Don Staley thumb wrestling competition at midcourt was one idea I had. And then I also thought, but admittedly, this is too much of an advantage towards Texas.
Okay.
I thought about a long distance jacket throwing competition, and whoever could throw their jacket further between Dawn and Vic gets the number 1 seed. But admittedly,
Okay.
one coach is a little bit more experienced at that than the other. So a
My
little bit of advantage there, but that's where
my
my mind immediately
idea
went to.
is I wanna see Vic and Dawn play one-on-one.
Well, talk about also being advantaged.
No, also tic-tac-toe
But
between
that
the
could
2 of
result in a
them.
tie, and then what?
True. What else is, like, really random? Ooh, they have to do the New York Times crossword. Whoever does it faster gets the number 1 seed.
Oh, okay. Like pull out the Wordle or something.
Yeah,
Just do like put together like a coaching skills competition where it's like the NBA and WNBA All-Star like skills competition where you're passing and stuff, but it's like you're
Wait.
passing to one of your players, you're having to like dribble down the court, you're having to diagram a play in a certain amount of time. Like that's my dream.
On that same note, that you have them go through like a Survivor-esque challenge where they have to like do a puzzle and then like go through a thing and then like throw the rings on the thing and like
throwing the jacket could be a step on the skills
challenge. Yes. Oh my goodness. Wow. See, the SEC needs to be watching our podcast.
This is how I know that they're not really about it. Because not only did you not figure out the tiebreaker to begin with,
you got lazy.
And you just went with a coin flip. Like you could have had them doing minute to win it challenges.
Yeah.
You know, like
we didn't even plan any of this before we started recording.
No, this is just off top.
This is just
come on. SEC be better.
We could play a game. We could play a game of Pictionary. Whoever wins gets the number 1 seed. So yeah, the SEC just do better, I guess, is our messaging. But like, it's going to be interesting to see who ends up winning the coin flip. Yeah, boring. You could have done a whole broadcast.
Assuming they get to there. They get to there, they got to take business. They got to take care of business.
Take care of business.
Couple matchups, but assuming they get there, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, we spent a lot of time on the non-basketball part of this.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the Big 12. Is that what we agreed on, or
ACC?
ACC. Wow, we talked about this order so many times, and I'm still messing it up so bad.
It's right there.
I full screen.
Oh, okay. So it's right here. Yeah.
Oh god. Okay, moving on to the ACC because can you tell it's Thursday and it's been a long week? But anyway, Notre Dame basically has the ACC, but like, we also saw NC State. Well, like, you should have watched that game. If you haven't watched that game, click pause at this moment. Go watch the game and then come back.
Double overtime and everything. Yeah.
Oh, the double overtime. Okay, so it was Sunday afternoon. I was getting ready to go cover the Raptors game. And I was like, yeah, I have tons of time. 2-hour game, whatever, and then I'll leave. So it gets closer and closer, and I'm like, okay, overtime. I can stay for overtime. Like, overtime's fine. Double overtime. I'm like, so I like order an Uber, get in the car, and I'm like watching on my phone like the last bit of double overtime. But double overtime kind of went, like, it wasn't as exciting. But that game. And also like, I think that just like is if you need to explain the state of women's college basketball right now, you just go watch that game. Like, that's the level we're at.
That's the chaos. Yeah, that was great. And now Notre Dame, like, they have control. Like, they control their own destiny in this. Well, like, you're playing at the time recording this, like, on Thursday afternoon. They played Florida State tonight, and then you play Louisville.
Yeah,
like those are 2 ranked teams right now. Like, those are 2 teams that are legit. Like, this is not like
your wiggle room. Like, because having a loss and not just having it be a loss, but having it be to the number 2 team in the conference means that, okay, literally anyone else you lose to, if you then ended up tied with the number 2 team, well, you know, you still have your head-to-head there, but to go into it,
no coin flip here.
No coin flip.
Exactly. No coin flip at all. And I mean, they're also coming off of a loss in their game against Florida State, which they have not experienced a whole lot this year, not at all in ACC play. And so it's just crazy timing. Actually, we'll talk about this for the other couple conferences, but like the timing of some of these games being lined up down the stretch, especially when they are not necessarily the games that you would have anticipated would have the consequences they do. In one case, I think that we probably did, but in others, not as much. Like, it's so crazy to have everything really backloaded to have so much consequence.
Yeah. No, it's
what I mean. Yeah, like the expectation is that Notre Dame kind of like takes care of business and finishes it out. But then you have the tournament, which again, like, if you would have asked me a few months ago, I'd have been like, yeah, like Notre Dame definitely has that under lock. But then NC State just goes and absolutely like gives us the game of the year.
This was the peak of NC State. Like obviously, this is an NC State team that made the Final Four, but frankly has been underwhelming at times throughout this season. Like especially early on. But like once they've hit ACC play, they've been good and like have been like on the uptick. Like it's been better and better. And like I not to say that they've peaked here because they keep doing that, but like this has been like the crescendo almost. Like was this performance, and so like Notre Dame might be able to pull it out in the regular season the rest of the way. I think that there's definitely like some concerns like that are like fair to have about Notre Dame after this game because I feel like some of the decision making and like
the fouling,
the fouling, the shot making wasn't there in a way that we've like. I mean, they're the
except
best
from
3-point
Sony
shooting
Citron.
team. Hello,
Sony.
But like their 3-point shooting, which is I think at the best rate in the country. Yeah, I'm about to say I thought so. I knew they were at the top or near the top, if not. But like that was uncharacteristic. So like on one hand, there's some stuff that are like tangible that like yeah, that's weird that this happened. Like in the sense of like some of the mistakes that they made, some of the turnovers, and there's other stuff that you can kind of you generally speaking you feel like you can kind of throw out with like the shooting. Like how often are they going to shoot? Like you know like this is the outlier as opposed to the norm when it comes to Notre Dame. But like, there's still genuine questions to have about Notre Dame after that loss. But also, oh, excuse me. Also, and for NC State, like, hello, like you know, like this is like the NC State again. Like, it was a little bit of a slower start. You lose some of your players from the Final Four, but like Zoe Brooks came to play, Zaya James came to play, Sanaya Rivers came to play, almost a triple double. Like, I mean, like this is like the three-headed monster that like we kind of expected. I think to pick up steam a little bit quicker in this season, like coming off the Final Four. But it's all about playing your best basketball at the best time. And if this is like the start of that run for them, I mean, truly, sky's the limit when you have players like that on the perimeter that are able to score in the way that they have.
Yeah, and I mean, before we move on, I just like that play with Zaya James where she went behind the back
in double overtime.
In double overtime, and it wasn't even her just being flashy because sometimes
that was the right move.
It was the right move.
It was still so the gall, the absolute gall to do that. Like, I mean, that's real hoop.
We were watching that after practice at Rollins College down in Florida because, you know, went straight from Waco to Orlando. And I'm sitting there next to my mom on the bus watching on my phone. And she, like, looks over and we're watching that play. And she's like, huh, yeah, that was the right move. Like, especially as a coach. Like, yeah, like, you're ready to be like, why would you risk whatever?
You want to be mad at that.
No, that's just what you should be doing. Like,
and
that's execution.
Miles couldn't foul her because she had 4 fouls. So it was so good. Well it was done. Just like, and I love that it went in because if it didn't go in, we would have been like, the potential of that, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But it went in and it was beautiful. And it, like, I think Tyler, you shared the video and I watched it like 17 times and it was so, so good. So yeah, definitely ACC is another one that's going to be interesting. Moving on now to the Big 12. Finally got the order right. I checked. Yeah, Jamie, let's hop to you quickly.
I'm about to say, Jamie, this is
take the mic because this is your expertise here.
Yeah, this is the first time that the Big 12 has ever had its regular season and championship decided on the last day of the regular season with a head-to-head matchup because that kind of thing just don't happen that often. For all of that to line up is frankly pretty wild. So, man, not what I anticipated coming into this season, that's for sure. But down the stretch in conference play, every year I come in to a new season, and one of the biggest questions that I find myself facing and debating over the course of the entire season is, who is Baylor? And that's been the case for years now. This year was no different. I think that it's hard to have one answer because they're a team that generally has such extreme potential, but has just had little things that maybe they miss or little hiccups. And that's the case for many elite teams. But this year, down the stretch, when they need to execute, They have been executing. The first time that like my eyes really kind of reopened was when they played UCLA close, and I said, I didn't think
what's going on here?
Should have happened.
Yeah.
I was like the whole time I was just waiting for UCLA to like really break it open, and they didn't necessarily the way that they had in almost every game over the season. And I did not really give Baylor a fighting chance in that game for various reasons. And so when they were able to dig deep and make that a game, I said, all right, I'm paying attention. Let's see where this goes. And now recently they lost Diana Taurasi, who is the greatest pro prospect they have on their team. She's incredible. They're still playing pretty well. Okay.
Yeah. Going to Kansas State without DLB, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was like, I feel like this. Kansas State notably doesn't have Ayoka Lee either, which is very important to mention. But Kansas State has still been very good. But
they've been executing really well even without that. And so for them to go in and just not only without Diana Taurasi, you lose Bella Fauntleroy early in the game, and you still take care of business,
and not just win, but by 17.
Yeah. At one point, K-State makes a run back at it, and then they just put them down and said, that's enough of that, and just put it down. I mean, super, super impressed. I am very intrigued to see how this kind of season-deciding game goes, because they're coming up against a TCU team that has at times been extremely dominant, has at times had sort of uncharacteristic. There's been certain games where they just look like they're not clicking quite as much, but ultimately they mostly have taken care of business in a really big way. But gosh, and there's a lot of matchups that I think should go TCU's way, but the way that Baylor's been playing, I just have a really hard time betting against them, especially at home. They had a really great crowd when I was down there. I know that they will for sure. I mean, they've got a handful of seniors. They're very old. That's what, with my normal, regularly scheduled programming, like Coach Fenley been talking about, all the best teams in the country are old. That is a fact. And those are two old teams that are matching up against each other. Like, they've been there before. So
yeah, Tyler.
This is going to be.
Yeah. They're older than me.
Older than Tyler.
Older than me.
True. Oh my God.
And I've been out of college.
No, have you seen all those videos this week of like, this was the Oregon Ducks team in 2019?
Yes, I sure have.
Anyway, we'll move on.
Yeah.
Go Baylor.
No, it'll be a crazy, crazy game. It'll be very, very interesting.
It'll be like heated too. Like there's
for sure. Like those are
Texas religious school beef. Texas religious school beef.
Oh my gosh, true.
No, like this is like a legitimate beef here.
Like back to the Romans
on
up in here.
Like look,
the beef.
Like there's beef.
There's
Big
tea.
12.
There's pine.
Bro, like this is like. The Big Ten is going to steal the headlines of like just for the for it being Battle of LA and also being I know we're about to touch on, but like this game should legitimately be very, very good. And like
if you're going to talk about a game that's got a high potential to be spicy,
it's this one.
Spicy.
It's this one. And I know for me, just generally speaking, kind of in looking ahead, like in comparison to what we've seen recently compared to what we looked at. I just pulled up the box score from the first matchup between these two teams where TCU won 80-75.
Oh, that's not a lot.
No. Yeah. And frankly, TCU starting lineup was like hoop. Like you have Haley Van Lith with 19, Madison Carter with 21, Sedona Prince 24 in that game. And Von Lay only has 9 points in that game. And in this game against Kansas State,
she's been
she in recent times has been very, very good. And obviously Sedona Prince, who, I mean, no one really has like the exact height to match her in the Big 12 right now. But Anna Vonleh has the size and just the ability to kind of push her out the paint. And so
she's been defended a lot better lately. Like,
yes.
There's been some schemes that have been implemented by teams that I think other people have kind of adopted. And so the numbers have dropped off a little bit as of late. And Baylor especially has the personnel, I think, to execute
Completely
that.
agree.
So I mean, part of it is going to be Baylor, what kind of depth they have available.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't anticipate, based on what I've seen, Ariana Little-Page both being back. The big
Yeah.
one is going to be if Bella's back.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, shoot, I tell you what, they've had Wyatt Jennings coming in and making some big shots, and then the starters have just been like doing their thing. So
yeah, I'm excited, and also to know, like, Hailey Van Lith, also, like, just talking about like recent performances, she goes against West Virginia, who has arguably the best. I mean, like, if you go like player for player and like pure perimeter defense capabilities,
yes,
he plays against them and goes 8 of 12 for 26 points. Like, and there's not many teams that are guarding the perimeter better than West Virginia from a pure personnel perspective, and the emphasis on that when it comes to how much they want to defend the perimeter in that way. Hailey Van Lith just completely carved them up in that game. And so, like, we're seeing two teams that, like, have players, like, maybe not like the teams themselves at the highest peaks that they've been at throughout this entire season. I think you might be able to say that for Baylor. I think TCU, it's kind of been up and down a little bit more in that way. But when it comes to players, like, coming off big-time performances, both teams have that. And that's very exciting when it comes to just the form that these individual players are in going into a game that, like we said, has every opportunity to turn spicy. So I'm very excited for this one.
Yeah, that one's going to be, like you said, tea and spicy.
Yeah.
A little bit of a tea with a bit of hot sauce on the side. Okay, let's switch gears to the Big Ten, which honestly has been, and maybe just because I've watched the most Big Ten, but like I've been loving the Big Ten this year. I think I've been saying that quite a lot. But you have, the UCLA USC matchup coming up this weekend, which round 2, let's go.
And decides it.
Yeah, and then
decides the Big Ten.
Who wins the Big Ten.
Goodness.
Which then decides the seeding for the Big Ten tournament, which is going to be another movie. And like, you think about the fact that USC beat UCLA. It is the reason that they're not ranked number 1 anymore. Juju Watkins had, again, that generational game. And then, like, a couple weeks later, you play them again. So that's still fresh. You still have all of you've been watching the film probably for like 2 weeks straight. Like, this is the game. Like, this is what UCLA's season has been building to, is that they want to win the Big Ten, they want to win the tournament, and they want to win the national championship. And like, the only thing standing in their way is Juju Watkins, like, and the whole USC team. Like, it's like the script writers did the script, and it worked.
I mean, this was the only way that this was able to end up. Like, this ending this way is super fun.
Like, I really hope that the second matchup between these two games was like put on a different day, and the Big Ten was like, let's make it the last.
Yeah, I mean, like, they knew what was up. They knew what was up. But I mean, like, kind of diving into this one, like, the run that USC is on right now. I mean, frankly, like, we didn't think USC was going to beat UCLA. And before, like, remember the game before that, they beat Ohio State by 21, right? So if you pull it back, pretty much, so they had the Iowa loss. If you pull it back from there, they haven't lost since. Wisconsin, blowout. Ohio State, blowout. UCLA, not a blowout, but like, you really like asserted yourself in that game. Washington, close. Michigan State, close. Illinois, 10-point. So like, some very, all very good, solid wins. Some really, really like impressive wins against ranked teams within that. I say all that to say, like, UCLA hasn't even been in the best form. They play Iowa close, who I've been high on Iowa the whole season, even kind of after the stretch. Like, I felt good about Iowa. They played ranked teams very well. They played USC very well. Beat them, I still just feel like UCLA is overall the better team here. Yeah. And now you're playing at home. You have the film. You have the energy. Like, even though UCLA has not been their best selves, even since like kind of the bounce back since then, like, hasn't been incredibly impressive in the sense of like UCLA standards, right? I'm in that mindset, not general basketball mindset, because they're still picking up wins. I still just feel like UCLA should feel, frankly, I think they should still be the number 1 team in the nation. So I think they should feel disrespected about that. You lost your rival, and it was a historic game. I don't think UCLA takes that kindly, and the bounce back, I feel, is legit. I mean, the stakes literally can't be higher, like, in the Big Ten. Like,
you're talking about a game that has like consequences and tea and might get spicy and all of that stuff, this is another one because like there's emotion there.
There's no checkbox left unchecked in like what makes this game so good. And so like again, it was to me being there in person, it was a bad day from UCLA. And some of that was USC forced, and I also felt like frankly some of that was UCLA on their own, but it doesn't matter. It happens. Like the result is a result. You take that as it is, no matter who forced it. It's not a sense of like, oh, UCLA lost the game. Like, no, USC won it, but it did take one of the greatest performances I've ever seen in my entire life from Juju Watkins.
Exactly.
And is she capable of doing that again? Yes.
Yes.
Am I repeating the same thing that I said before the first game and USC ended up winning? Yes.
Yep.
Am I still picking UCLA to win this? Yes, I am.
Wow.
I feel they're the best. They're the better team.
You have the juice of being at home for USC in that first matchup, and now, as you said, Tyler, to say they've been watching the film. Like it's really hard to win a game the same way twice against the same opponent. And so, especially after what happened in the first game, I have been very vocal in saying that I think that USC is at their best when it's not simply the Juju show, when you get everyone involved. And it felt like UCLA had that same mindset. And so they were trying to contain her without selling out to allow everyone else to get involved. Well, we saw how that panned out. And so you come into this game and you're faced with this conundrum of do we try everything to prevent what hurt us the first time, or do we say we still don't think that is their peak form, so to speak, and try to have some more of that balance? And I think that it leans more towards the latter, where you're not going to fully sell out. You're not going to be triple teaming Juju on every possession, in my opinion, because she still has the ability to distribute. She still has tremendously capable players around her. As we saw in that game, the reason they were able to push to the finish line was Kiki getting involved. And so your win condition is still not completely selling out on Juju Watkins. But I think that even more so it is to have better offense, just to be a little bit more efficient. And so much of that comes from being at home, hopefully being a little bit healthier, Lauren being out for a game. Honestly, maybe not the worst thing to be able to take some of that time if needed. Yeah. And be pretty healthy. And you've got a chip on your shoulder. And so if all of that isn't enough to get you ready to execute, nothing will be. I will say if, sometimes, you can get a chip on your shoulder and that can really give you motivation going forward. If UCLA drops this one, to me, they are not a serious national championship contender.
Ooh. I mean, like when it comes to like the confidence, I mean, like, because frankly, like we on this podcast compared to the general discourse surrounding UCLA and the Big Ten, have been higher on the other games that they have won, and because people were kind of like waiting for this USC game, but ultimately, if you lose both battles of LA, like some of those critiques like start genuinely starting to like ring a lot more true, So like I think that like not that USC, I mean obviously there's still so much on the line, right? But I do think that there's absolutely more pressure on UCLA to win this game, which would be interesting to see. Like I think like without question. And so I'm interested in seeing how do they handle that? How do you settle in to that, early on in this game? And one point you did make that I'm interested in is like you said it's hard to win the same way twice. And I completely agree, right? It to do the same thing and win twice. Have we seen USC win any other way this season? Like honestly, like and then like and I say that not out of a capability.
In a tough game.
Right. That's what I'm getting
at. Because there have been games.
Yes.
Well,
the only one I think might be is UConn.
Yeah. That's what I was looking for. That is the only, and that was where we saw the other way.
at this point, it's a long time ago, you know?
Yep.
I mean, so, like, you've shown you can do it, but, like, so, like, I don't disagree with you in the sense of, like, I don't think that you start throwing, like, the triple teams at Juju and, like, forcing the ball out of their hands, but I do think that should be. I don't think that's how you start the game. I think that should be a genuine pivot available because you can't let what happened the first time happen.
Oh yeah.
And so like if she starts on fire again, I'll throw that at her early and force USC to prove that they can win this game in a different way. Which are they capable of? I absolutely think so because they have very very good players around this team and around Juju. But frankly, they haven't forced themselves to win in that way against top competition. The only thing was in spurts against UConn, and it looked good at times in that. But that's a long time ago. It's not well refined in that way, and so I'll be interested in seeing like if UCLA did just immediately throw that at USC, I wouldn't hate it. But I would prefer like if I'm Corey Close, I'm trusting my team. I think I have the better team overall, and I start the same way that I did and you see how Juju is, but I would not hesitate to pivot into that in that sense and force USC to prove that they can beat one of these teams in that way.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting again because I do think there is more of a possibility of winning the same gateway twice if the games were further apart in time. Like, the fact that keeps coming back into my mind is that it was literally a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's definitely interesting, and, like
literally 2 weeks ago from today.
Oh, wow, there you go. Yeah, and I think just, like, the Big Ten in general is gonna be such an interesting tournament because you have these 2 very dominant teams, but we've seen them have days, or we've seen the other teams in the Big Ten have days where they can just dominate top teams,
Oh, for
and
sure.
like,
especially that's a tournament where the early rounds are maybe going to be the best of any conference.
Exactly.
Like I could
yeah.
see, like I could frankly see, I could see Oregon upsetting a team if
Oh!
they're hitting their threes. I could see
Washington.
Washington. I could see Iowa. I mean, Ohio State is
Michigan.
still there and feels like they have gone under the radar now.
Yeah.
But they are absolutely capable of doing that. Like, I mean, it feels like anybody, and that's not even getting into the other ranked team like Michigan State, Illinois. You know what? So like it feels like anyone outside of LA winning the Big Ten would be a massive upset in that way. But frankly, and I would agree with that, it would be an upset. But like from just on in the sense of would I be surprised? I don't think I'd be surprised.
No. It would be entertaining.
Not if you've been paying attention to the Big Ten this whole season. Surprise, upset, yes. Surprise, no.
No, yeah. And like then it turns into okay, then you move on to March, like March Madness, and like I think a Big Ten team maybe out of all the conferences has the most potential to then go farther than we expect, like do an NC State or
great upset potential.
Great Cinderella story potential.
I could get behind that. Yeah, I definitely think the Big Ten, because the SEC.
I mean, yeah.
I know. I'm trying to think. Like who would like at what point? It's like below probably what LSU would be considered Cinderella team.
Especially
so
as far as like perception of what is an upset and where people will be seated.
Right.
The Big Ten, as you said, Tyler, has maybe been a little bit devalued. And I think that there's going to be some teams that are maybe a little bit underseated even for where they should be.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Makes it.
I mean, yeah, we'll get into it in a few weeks, obviously, but like there are so many teams I could think of that, that could make a big, like a Cinderella run. Tennessee, I think, is one that stands out to me. There's all these teams that kind of sit like that are ranked right now, teams that have been coming in and out of the rank, like
Vandy!
Vandy! Our Vanderbilt agenda continues. I wonder if someone from that team just like watches every week and is like,
Vandy.
Yeah, man.
We have to get our government mandated Vandy. That's the only thing that the U.S. and Canada governments can agree on right now.
Yeah, is that Vanderbilt?
Is making sure that we talk about Vandy at least once
a week, and then I make a Toronto Tempo reference at least once a week.
That's it.
Hey, before we wrap, I have one personal agenda message to convey. If you are someone who follows a college team, who lives close to a college team, most college teams are wrapping up their regular season. Which means that there's a lot of senior nights. Some have already passed, but if they have not, and there is a team you follow, there is a team you can get to, please go to senior nights. It's really meaningful, especially people talk about a lot in the transfer portal era, whatever. If a player finishes their career at your school, that is such a high compliment because, you know, there's kind of the saying, if it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And so they chose that school as the place that they decided was the best for them for whatever reason. And when they're there, you know, they're really giving their all. And then on the other side of things, you have the people who have been at a school for 4 and in some cases 5 years.
Or 7.
Yeah. 4 or 5 years, maybe more. And if they have given all that time to your school, like, I mean, look, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that no one will ever know. People like to, you know, talk about sports as if it's just like solely entertainment and not think about the fact that like these are actual human beings. This isn't a television show. And that's like a whole side rant that I haven't had on this show that I'm sure I will eventually, but isn't the point right now. But these players have done a lot for these schools. I obviously am thinking of the one that I'm going to call this weekend, which is Iowa State senior night, which will be a tremendous matchup with K-State. But we only have one senior, and it's a 5th year, and it's Emily Ryan. And she's one of the greatest people you will ever meet, one of the greatest teammates you will ever meet. She is the reason why every single person at Iowa State is there still, and that is not an exaggeration. That is every player, every coach. Bill Fenley has said she is the reason he is still coaching, and from there on down, that's why everyone's there. And just the things that she has done, the things she has gone through to play this season are incredible. And so obviously I've been out there kind of pounding the drum for people in my own circle to be there for her, but there's people that mean that much to programs everywhere. So if you have the ability to get to a senior night, please do. They deserve your support. They deserve your love.
Yeah, and I think what people forget sometimes is that like more players than not end their careers in college. Like there's only a select few that end up going pro, and for the rest of them, like their senior night and like this is it for them. And so it's definitely if it's emotional and it's a lot, and they definitely deserve to be celebrated because it's a lot of sacrifice and a lot of time they've spent. But on that note, we are going to finish up. This is our last episode of the regular season of college.
Good Lord.
Which is wild, but we'll be back next week. We'll obviously talk about conference championships. We'll see what other chaos goes on in women's basketball for the next week, because obviously there's going to be some. But make sure to follow us over on socials, Chelsea, Tyler, and Jamie. Make sure to subscribe to Her Hoop Stats so you can watch all of our lovely podcasts and check out the Her Hoop Stats database if you're like us and love to dive into stats. We will see you next time, hopefully on schedule next week. We'll see you next Wednesday, and have a great day.